So after I finished Death Note recently, I thought it was going to be a long time until I saw an anime that I enjoyed anywhere near as much. But oh boy, was I wrong. Because Steins came along and totally blew me away. I think it's brilliant, and I'm going to be talking about it today in this review. I hope you enjoy. So let's get straight into it. What is Steins Gate about? Well, I'm not going to reveal too much about the plot at this early stage, but the sort of basic premise is you have this self-proclaimed mad scientist called Okabe Rintaro, and he lives with a couple of his friends above this sort of TV shop in this future gadget lab, as they call it. And they kind of chance upon this thing, this sort of device, using their microwave. They manage to send text messages back in the past. And of course, if you can do that, you can sort of change the future by doing that. And as a result, they need to basically try and stop this big corporation that are going to abuse time travel in the future. And they've got to try and sort of save humanity from this terrible future that's going to be happening to them if things don't change. But it's interesting, really, because I think with that description, although that is an accurate description, the series does kind of go off in a direction that you don't really expect. And I think that's a good thing. You know, from what I said, it seems like there's going to be some big battle against the corporation. It was going to be very fighty and sciencey and maybe even a little bit political kind of thing. Steins Gate is more character driven, I would say. It's more about the relationships between Okabe and his friends, and also the emotional and practical consequences of effectively going back and changing the past. It sort of tackles the issue of time travel in a way that I haven't really experienced before. And I've watched a fair bit of time travel stuff, and a lot of it is, you know, there's a lot of the same cliches and tropes that are kind of just going over and over again in time travel. It's very difficult to make something that's completely different. But Steins Gate, I think it just approaches the whole time travel thing from a complete different perspective. And that's what makes it really interesting. So if you read a lot of reviews of Steins Gate, a lot of them will be pretty similar, to be honest. They'll kind of be structured like this. They'll say, well, it was pretty slow and didn't particularly sort of grab anyone's attention at the beginning. It's a little bit weird and maybe even childish the first few episodes. And then it sort of kind of gets going. And then there's a point in about the middle of the anime where it really just takes off. There's a sort of big event that happens and bang, that's it. It is craziness from there on in. What's my opinion? Well, honestly, I hate to sort of conform to the group, the crowd, but that's pretty much my opinion as well, but it's sort of in a more complimentary way than that. The first couple of episodes honestly didn't particularly grab my attention at all. In fact, I was starting to think maybe I'm not going to like this, but I sort of stuck with it, and you really do have to stick with it to get a full amount of enjoyment. The first couple of episodes are kind of strange. It seems like not really a lot is happening. It seems a little bit weird. The characters seem a little bit off. I didn't really quite relate to them. For example, Okabe talks in an extremely verbose, over-the-top, over-dramatic way, and I didn't really sort of understand what he was about, really. I didn't really understand what his friends were about. But actually, as the anime goes on, a lot of it in the early stages is sort of character development, building up the characters and their relationships, and very quickly you start to realise that these characters are great. They really are great. And for example, Okabe, who I was just sort of quote-unquote criticising, turns out to be one of the most interesting and likeable characters of the whole series. Another interesting thing to say is that the first episode, for example, which didn't particularly grab my attention, it seems like not a lot's going on, like I said, but actually, not going to spoil anything, but in the grand scheme of things, what happens in the very early stages, although might seem irrelevant and not particularly interesting, is actually hugely important later on down the line. That seems like I'm being very critical of the first half, and actually, that's not the case. Although the first two episodes didn't particularly engage me, from episode sort of 3 onwards, you start to really sort of engage with the characters. I thought it was very funny, and this isn't really a sort of comedy. I mean, it certainly has got comedy aspects to it, but I thought it was very funny. I thought the interactions between the characters were great. You know, there's Daru, who's this hack, as he's called, and he's, you know, a bit of a sort of otaku kind of figure, so might be relatable to some people, I don't know. And there's a sort of a lot of banter and sort of back and forth dialogue going on, which is really funny. And that was particularly what engaged me. Really, I enjoyed the characters as much as I did the plot, because this is more of a character-driven anime than you'd probably think on the surface. Saying that, it wasn't just comedy. In fact, I think the great merit of Steins Gate is that it has really a bit of everything. It really does excel in pretty much every facet of what an anime should. You know, as I said earlier, there's the comedy element, but it's also elements that are very serious and sort of thought-provoking, whether that's the ethics of sort of going back and forth in time and the things they do, but also there are sort of emotional moments. There are moments which will make you very happy, moments that will make you very sad, moments that will make you laugh. This really did have it all. And I think the anime was very, very close to being perfect, to be honest. I think the one and only criticism that I have really with it is that I think that for a lot of people it will fail to engage them in the very early stages. I feel like if the first couple of episodes had been done slightly differently so that it was more engaging and exciting, then maybe the anime would be even more highly regarded, but I still think it's very, very good. My main criticisms sort of pertain to the beginning section of the anime, that's for sure. So to sort of summarise the non-spoiler section, what I would say is I implore you to stick with it. You know, it can be very tempting to just give up in the first few episodes, and I understand why some people would do that because it doesn't necessarily seem particularly interesting to most people. I think the majority of people that don't like Steins Gate or that have given it very negative reviews probably have given up within the first 2 or 3 episodes, and you can't really fully assess an anime or give an opinion if you've watched like about 10% of it. So, you know, anyone that is giving really negative reviews, I would probably question whether they'd seen all 25 episodes. But now I'm going to be talking about some spoilers, so definitely if you haven't watched Steins Gate, stop here, watch the anime, and then go back to this bit because you don't want to be spoiled. It's just not that kind of thing you want to be spoiled on. So, I'll be back in a minute. Thank you for watching. Alright, so let's talk about some spoilers now, and I'm going to get straight into the thick of it, really. I think one of the things I liked most was that it wasn't too predictable, and that's kind of an interesting point which I'll bring up in a minute, but there were 2 moments in particular that really did shock me, and I think that, you know, when you have plot twists in a lot of these things, a lot of the time it can be kind of predictable, or it can kind of feel like forced or contrived. There were 2 moments which particularly sort of put me in a state of shock at the end of the episode where I thought I didn't see that coming. The first one was when Suzuha admitted to being John Titor. Now, you could argue that I possibly could have seen this coming. In fact, I think it was fairly obvious that she was some sort of time traveller because she knew, for example, that Kurisu was in the future going to be a big reason why CERN got a hold of the whole time travel thing, and they knew all about that. So I think it was fairly obvious that she was a time traveller of sorts, so maybe I should have seen it. But I just did not expect her to be John Titor at all. I just assumed John Titor was a man because he had a male voice when they were reading out his, you know, bits on the forum, and also John Titor is a man's name. I actually thought, and this was interesting, I thought this would have been cool as well, but they didn't go in this direction. I thought John Titor was actually going to be Okabe. I thought that he was talking to himself in the future. I thought that would have been quite cool. Saying that though, Suzuha's character was really, really badass, and I thought it was just really cool that she was John Titor. When she admitted that at the end of the episode, I was in a state of shock for a minute. I didn't expect it. I don't think most people would have. But maybe I should have seen that coming. The second one, though, it shocked me, that's for sure. And that was Mr. Braun. Now, Mr. Braun was a character I really, really liked. Sure, he was a bit grumpy and all that, but he seemed to be a really good father, for example. And actually, the episode where it is revealed that he is basically some sort of... well, he's not exactly a great person. He's been controlling the girl known as Shining Finger, and he is the sort of FB character. And that episode, I was thinking, oh, he's really, really sweet to his little girl, and he's a really nice guy, and I was thinking, you know, it's really nice that he's a good sort of father figure and all that, and then literally about 5 minutes later after me thinking that, it's revealed that he is controlling Shining Finger, and then he shoots her in the head, and I'm like, okay, did not see that coming. You know, I thought that was a really good plot twist, and it's not easy to sort of carry out those kind of plot twists. Can I also say how much I love Makise Kurisu? She's such a great... Isn't she just perfect? I mean, damn, she really is perfect. I love the characters. I just, you know, I said this earlier, the sort of back and forth between the characters is so good. But what I love, I think particularly, and I say this quite a lot in my reviews, is that a character trait that is very, very endearing to me anyway, personally I find it very endearing, is when characters make big sacrifices for other people. And I've mentioned this before. I mentioned it in Toradora, for example. I mentioned it recently in the review of Orange, that there's a character that makes big sacrifices. And talk about sacrifices, the whole of the second half of Steins Gate is about people making sacrifices so that Mayuri can live. For example, you've got Ferris, who basically gives up having her dad around anymore and the sort of life she lives with her parent because she decides to save Mayuri instead of having her dad around, who basically should be dead if it wasn't for the D-mails. You also have the character, I think she's called Ruka, she, quote unquote she, who gives up being a girl for Mayuri, and that's, basically her one wish was to actually be a girl, and she has to go back on that. And then, of course, there's the ultimate sacrifice by Makase Kurisu, where she essentially is willing to die for Mayuri. She is willing to sort of take the place of Mayuri and go back to the original world line where she gets stabbed so that Mayuri can survive. So that element of self-sacrifice, coupled with the fact that, of course, Okabe goes through an absolutely massive amount to save Mayuri, reliving her death over and over again. And also a thing that, obviously they don't show it every time because it would be boring, but you must think, God, the amount of times he's had to explain to Kurisu about, we've sent all these emails, we're now going to have to go back in time and reverse them all. The amount of times he's had to explain that to Kurisu, probably hundreds of times, you don't see it every time, but I think that must have been so frustrating for Okabe, and so frustrating him seeing Mayuri die every time. So again, although, he basically sacrifices his sanity for a large proportion of Steins Gate for Mayuri. So I really loved that. I thought that the characters were so much more endearing because they sacrificed so much. And although Daru didn't go through anything like that in terms of the D-mail, I thought it was quite sad that he basically didn't get to meet his daughter, essentially, because, of the whole world line thing, and he essentially forgot his daughter and all of that. So, all the characters basically made sacrifices. They were all, I say all, most of them were pretty good people, and they were very, very endearing and likeable. And as I say, at first it's funny because I didn't find them particularly likeable. I didn't find them particularly relatable or funny or anything in the first few episodes, but by the end I was in love with all of them. So, I suppose it's very good character development, really, that these people have gone from slightly strange, odd characters to actually people that you become very used to and very much sort of emotionally attached to them. And what's interesting about Steins Gate is that it could have been very, very repetitive. The entire sort of arc of the second half of Steins Gate is essentially Okabe repeating certain days over again, repeating the event over and over and over again until he gets it right, until he goes back to the original world line. And in the sort of timeline, chronologically, the episodes are very repetitive because you're sort of reliving the same days, the same hours over and over again. But despite that, and I don't know really how they managed to do it, but I'm not complaining, I didn't find the episodes repetitive at all. I found that each episode was engaging, enlightening in different ways, and although it was essentially just a sort of deja vu thing, I thought it could have been very easy that it would have been repetitive, but it just somehow wasn't. So credit to the anime for that. I think that's very, very impressive as well. I also thought the ending was very clever, and often when you have these situations where a character's going to die, but then they get saved right at the end, it's quite often this sort of Deus Ex Machina thing where a character will magically come in out of nowhere and save the day, but actually the way that Okabe saves Kurisu is really quite clever, I thought. The fact with the fake blood, and you realise, at the beginning she wasn't really dead, and it was so good how the end sort of brought you back to the beginning in such a clever way, and it made you really look at the first episode so much differently. I thought that was very, very clever indeed. And I also kind of like, it's sad, obviously, but I kind of like the fact that Kurisu didn't magically remember everything. She didn't just magically get the reading Steiner thing, and same with Mayuri and Daru and whatever. They kind of have weird, distant dreams, memories about the events of what Okabe had to go through, but I don't fully remember it. I feel like that would have been a bit of a cop-out if Kurisu had just sort of remembered everything magically at the end, and then she fell in love straight away with Okabe again, and everything was fine. It would have been too much of a sort of perfect ending. I think the message of it is that time travel is not perfect, and there are certainly a lot of complications, not just complications in terms of science, but complications in terms of morality, ethics, emotions, so on and so forth. The ending isn't perfect, but that's what makes it kind of sad in a way, that Kurisu doesn't remember. She goes through so much with Okabe and she doesn't fully remember it. I think that's kind of sad, but I think that makes Okabe and his character even more special in a way, because he's the only one that can fully remember what exactly went down. I know there is an alternative ending, and I will be watching Steins Gate Zero pretty soon, so we can discuss the other ending, but I thought I would want to discuss the actual original sort of canon ending right here and right now. And I think that's pretty much all I've got to say, to be honest. I think, in summary, like I said at the beginning, it is a slow burner. You really do have to stick with it. But if you do stick with it, it's fully worth it because it's such an engaging series. I think these are some of my favourite characters. And you know what? Like I said at the beginning, I didn't think that anything would nearly even eclipse Death Note after I watched Death Note. I thought it was so good, but I think what I like about Steins Gate so much is that it has the intricate plot, it has the sort of nerdy, sciencey thing about it, but also it's very, very character driven as well. I think more character driven than Death Note, for example. I think Steins Gate is really, really highly up there for one of my favourite anime, definitely, because I love the characters and I thought the plot suited them very, very well. But anyway, that's pretty much all I've got to say. I'll be back with more reviews very, very soon. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you around.